In this part of our course, we have discovered that there are a few rules of prosody to follow in the French language. We're here to compare and contrast some of these rules with their English counterparts when they exist. So, in French, vowels are pronounced the same way regardless of their position in the word. They're short and they do not vary. So let me take a couple of examples. The first name, Barbara, Barbara, is pronounced with 3 A's and they are pronounced the same way, Barbara. Emily has 2 E, and again, their position in the word does not affect the way they are pronounced, Emily. So what happens in English with these 2 examples?
Well, in English, the first name you mentioned would be generally pronounced as Barbara, and the other name as Emily. The vowels and unstressed syllables tend to be reduced in English. Sometimes they're even omitted.
In French, vowels are short in duration, and I believe it's also the case of most vowels in Spanish. In English?
Vowels in English are produced with varying duration. Vowels that occur in open syllables, and particularly those at the end of an utterance final word, tend to be produced the longest. If those are tense or so-called long vowels, they're produced as diphthongs. For example, go and I want to go is produced as go. And say and I can't say is produced as say. It would sound non-native to say go or say. But we'll talk more about vowel duration and its meaning later in this video series.
In French, words are glued together to create rhythmic groups of up to 7 syllables. They're called groupes rythmiques or intonation units. So, les anciens amis will become les anciens amis. And there's no pause between words within the same rhythmic group. Do English speakers proceed the same way by making no pause between words?
English doesn't behave the same way that French does in terms of rhythmic groups, but English speech sounds do influence their neighbors. And I think this is an important point to make about speech sounds in general. They do not behave like beads on a string. That is, they're not immune to sounds around them, but instead they're influenced by neighboring sounds. In terms of rhythm, English is fairly complicated. English is a word stress language, which means that the stress of individual words is of great importance to our understanding. Think of record and record. In addition to word stress, though, English speakers tend to spread out stress patterns across the entire utterance. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but in general, we don't allow our stresses to fall too close together. So even though we might say chocolate, if asked what flavor of ice cream we want, we'll change that stress if we're saying it in a larger collocation without any particular emphasis and meaning, like, she baked a delicious chocolate cake.
Within a sentence, each intonation unit goes down. So, in the following example, the sentence is made up of 3 units. En général, le samedi, je me repose. So the intonation goes up at the end of général, samedi, because they're positioned at the end of the rhythmic group within the sentence, and then it goes down at the end of the sentence after repose. Can you briefly explain for us, the intonation system in English?
Yeah, in English, the intonation process isn't quite as predictable. In general, we have falling intonation at the end of declaratory utterances and rising intonation at the end of yes-no questions. That said, intonation patterns can vary greatly depending on things like emphasis, individual style, and dialect. In addition, an utterance can consist of more than one intonation unit in English. Non-utterance final intonation units can end in a slightly rising intonation pattern, indicating the speaker's intent to continue to speak. So compare, I went to the post office yesterday, to I went to the post office yesterday and mailed that important letter.